Many are invited, but few are chosen. Dear friends, all of us from time to time might receive invitations to a special event. There might be a wedding, it might be some sort of party, some sort of gathering, and most of us receive this invitation with a sense of honour. They've thought of us. They would like us to be with them at this special occasion. And unless there was something very pressing, we would attend the gathering or the party. Of course, occasionally we can also have a good excuse why not to go, either because we've been invited elsewhere or we have something important that we cannot change. But today's Bible passage recounts the parable of the great banquet that Jesus shared with his disciples and by extension to the rest of us, where some of the excuses given for not attending the banquet were not good excuses. Let's go through the story. So the Lord Jesus said this parable. A man once gave a great banquet and invited many, and when it was time, he sent his servants to tell those who had been invited, "Come, for everything is now ready." But they all had some excuse why not to attend. The first said, "I have bought a field and I will go out and inspect it. Please have me excused." The other said that "I've bought 5 yoke of oxen and I must go and examine them." Another one said, "I've recently married and I cannot come." I don't know what excuse that was, but anyway. And the servant comes along back to the master and says, "None of those who you invited are coming." Now put yourselves in the shoes or sandals, as the case may be, of the person who did the inviting. He's prepared a banquet for some important occasion for him. He's invited his so-called friends, and they reject the invitation. How would you feel? If 2 or 3 rejected and the majority accepted, you'd say you wouldn't notice. But if everyone rejected, how would you feel? You would feel bad, you would feel unwanted, you would feel rejected, perhaps. And what we get from this householder is an instruction to the servants: go out into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in the poor and the maimed and the blind and the lame. The servants do as he instructs. They bring in all these people who certainly were not expecting to be at a banquet that night. And the servant says, "There is still room. Go out further into the highways, into the hedges, outside on the outskirts of the town, and compel people to come in, so that my house may be filled." Isn't that interesting? That those who are invited don't attend, and those who were not invited ended up attending. Hold on to that. And Jesus finishes the parable by saying the moral of the story Many are called, but few are chosen. Many are invited, the invitation is open, but few are chosen. Now this is interesting because chosen is an active verb, and it suggests that, well, the invitation is who you chose. So how are those who ended up at the banquet the chosen ones? Haven't perhaps they been doing some of the choosing? And that's important because it is a two-way response. A two-way street that requires a response from us to this invitation. Now, there are a number of interpretations of this parable. The first is historical, the second one is liturgical, and the third one is personally spiritual. Let's take them in a row. Historically speaking, it is understood that those who are chosen, and in the Old Testament there is a chosen people with the exact same words. Those who are chosen are a specific nation of people, the Hebrews. And they were chosen. And they had a very important role to play in history, if we look at it only from history. And that is to bring faith in the true God to the rest of the world. In many respects, they rejected the invitation of the great banquet. Now, the great banquet was not a party, it was not a gathering that was going to occur in a physical sense, in a temporal sense, we say, on earth. The great banquet is a bigger thing, an existential thing. The banquet represents our communion with God, our coming into oneness with God. That's our ultimate aim. And that even though the Hebrews were the chosen ones, they ultimately rejected the final invitation to come. That's the historical perspective, and those who eventually made it into the banquet are the rest of the nations historically. That includes Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, the entire world. The invitation went out. The blind, the lame, the maimed, those who didn't have it together, in other words, in terms of faith and religion, they eventually make it in. So that includes our ancestors. Full stop on the historical point of view. Now, it's very important not to get carried away with the historical point of view and say, yes, the Jews didn't make it and we have. There's no guarantee. We are in the same position as the Jews. We are in the same position as the Hebrews generally. And that is, we too can reject the invitation regardless of our religion of birth. We too may disconnect. We too may reject and not participate and be in the same position as with the historical point of view with the Jews. So let's move on from the historical and consider the liturgical. Liturgical is what we do as a community, what we do on a Sunday, what we do generally as an expression of what we believe in. So we gather on a Sunday, we pray together, we read passages from the Bible, we prepare bread and wine as body and blood of Christ, and we share that in the liturgy as an expression of our oneness with God, our communion with God, and our desire to ultimately achieve that existence, state of existence in the next life. Not this physical life necessarily, although it includes this life, certainly. So liturgically speaking, this is like a banquet. We get the invitation, we are invited. the church is not just the priests, the church is the community, and that includes you. And you might invite your family members, you might invite your children, you might invite your friends, you might invite non-Orthodox Christians at Easter or Christmas. Many do that, and that's nice. And we encourage you to do that. Where there is an invitation to someone's neighbour or a good non-Orthodox friend to attend one of our big festivals, please keep doing that. The invitation is out, and we come and gather in this great banquet, this great expression of what we ultimately believe life and existence to be. Now, what is the spiritually personal message for each and every one of us? Each and every one of us need to consider our position vis-à-vis this invitation. We have this invitation one way or another, either through heritage, exposed to it through our family and our cultural experience, but it would be very narrow of us to think that what we do here is expressed or should only be considered as a cultural phenomenon. Message, mostly in our adulthood, where the message cuts through somewhere along the way that make us or guide us in making those choices of our life, and we inspire people, not because we meant it, but because it happens to rub off. How many people have found the church purely by their acquaintance with another Christian, and with no particular effort from that Christian? As I said, if you go out to make the effort, you don't necessarily bring anyone to church. And that is especially the case with the Orthodox Church. We seem to have people find us. We don't find them. They find us. They read, they study. We get a lot of intellectuals and academics, people who are really interested and find Orthodox Christianity by themselves, eventually attending and eventually becoming Orthodox, all on their own. They've responded to the invitation. So the question is, what will our response be to this invitation? Is it going to be in the affirmative or in the negative? Is it going to be, yes, I'm coming, I would love to be there. Love being the key word. Not I have to be there. Not, oh, well, they're a relative, I'm obliged to be there. I would love to be there. I'm learning something, I'm gaining something, and so I want to be there. Or shall it be a negative response? And the negative response, as we've seen from the parable, comes with some excuses. Some of them better than others, but mostly they are excuses or reasons that can be overcome. They need not be the be-all and end-all of our relationship with divinity. Up until we used or introduced English in our churches, it was, I don't understand what's going on in the church, I don't understand the language. Fair excuse, mind you. I was born in Australia, I had great difficulty understanding, but I made an effort as a young child to learn and to use books and follow the service. It wasn't easy. And we can't expect, this is on the church's side, we can't expect people to go out and learn Greek, although many people have. But we can't expect everyone to do that, especially ancient Greek. But it wasn't a reason enough for hundreds and hundreds of people to say goodbye. People still kept coming. Why? Because the language is part of it, but not all of it. what we express here is also expressed through our music, through our iconography, through our symbolic actions. All those are a language in themselves. And those of us who missed out on the direct language, i.e. we didn't know Greek, were still attracted, were still drawn by the rest of the picture. And that is good. Now that we have English in our churches, we now get the following excuse not to come to church. Well, it's in English now, but I still don't understand what's going on. There is wisdom in what is being said, in that they have discovered that the language is not the only thing. They've discovered that there's other languages, there's other poetry to get through here. The symbolism, the art, and the music, and everything else we do. Even the elevated English can be a barrier, but it need not be a barrier for those who desire to learn. Another excuse might be, Sunday's sport day for my kids. That's a pretty lame excuse, as far as I'm concerned. I was a teacher for a very, very long time, way before I was a priest. And yes, our kids need to be engaged. Yes, our kids need to be active. But you can't attend on a Sunday morning. We're on YouTube these days. Put it on while you're driving. Put it on while you're driving back from sport. Put it on in the evening. Read a Bible passage with them. Put on something. I've recently discovered, in the same way that we have Netflix, which is an online channel, there are equivalent Christian channels which have cartoons, animations. The whole program is packed with Christian content. And that is something you can consider logging into and becoming a member of, and giving to your children to learn something. Podcasts for yourself as you're driving to work or driving from work. These are spiritual vitamins which are readily available to all of us, one way or another. Another excuse. The service takes too long. Well, that's true. A 3-hour service on a Sunday morning from 8 to 11 is technically long. But we're very, very happy to sit in front of TV for 6 hours at home and not complain about that. Why? Why? It's the why. And the answer is TV we enjoy. That makes sense. So the question is, how will you make this something you enjoy? There are two things that I advise. Number one, engage. Books, internet, social media. We have a bilingual script under our video. Engage, learn, pick up books, read. Ask the people around you. Ask your parish priest. And do the following. Come for as much as you can handle. We have a 3-hour service because there are people who can handle 3 hours and would love to be here more than 3 hours. And there's the occasional vigil that we do more than 3 hours. If you can handle half an hour, work backwards. Look at the finish time and work backwards from there. Don't look at the start time. Look at the finish time. If you finish at 11 o'clock, you can only handle half an hour. You've got little babies. Perfectly understandable. Just come the last half hour. Good. If you can handle an hour, time it so that you are here at 10 a.m. Once you do the first hour for about a year, you might find that this is good. I'm liking this. I'm learning something. This is really refreshing my batteries at the start of the week. I'll do an extra half hour. And you end up doing 1.5 hours. That's the whole liturgy. Eventually you say, I want more. I want more and more. And you get yourself to the position where so many of us are in attendance from the start for the entire 3 hours, because you place yourself in this spiritual dominion where you no longer use every word has to make sense anymore. That's the starting point. That certainly has to take place. But you then just get into the spiritual zone. You get into the spiritual realm of just floating through the service. And that's a beautiful thing. You are already coming into this experience beyond the black and white of what is on the paper. You are getting into a spiritual experience, and you can forget that you're even here eventually. That's my advice in terms of the various reasons or excuses we might not engage. And that was in reference to church attendance. I mean, this applies to our relationship with God. Generally, it applies to everything that we happen to talk about here. Enough said. The invitation is there. Our response is to be considered, each and every one of us, for ourselves. And we invite you to Christmas as well in the coming week.